Driving through the region known today as the West Bank, the heart of Canaan in biblical times, it's hard to believe that this was the promised land that Moses tried for so long to reach, but never did. Until an unexpected patch of green comes into view, signaling our arrival into the biblical city of palms, Jericho.
Jericho is one of the most interesting cities in the ancient Near East. There's a spring there that's still gushing out, hundreds of gallons of water per minute. It's always been a beautiful place to live, this oasis in what is now the middle of the desert.
It's believed to be the oldest continuously inhabited city in the world. Traces of 23 distinct civilizations have been found in a small archaeological park on the outskirts of town. But what draws pilgrims from around the world is actually the biblical account of how one of these ancient civilizations may have disappeared. Flying over the sprawling modern-day Jericho, we can just see the footprint of ancient Jericho, where the Bible tells us Joshua led his people, the Israelites, in their first conquest of land in the Promised Land. The Bible tells us that before his death on Mount Nebo, with guidance from God, Moses chose a man named Joshua to lead the Israelites on the last leg of their journey.
And so we have this real transition, a handing over of power from one generation to the next. Where Moses and his generation have been wandering. It's the story of wandering for 40 years. Joshua's more action-packed. It's where they come on in and they take over.
As told in the book of Joshua, the conquest of Canaan has all the trappings of a summer blockbuster.
Sounds like a movie. It's an action-packed scene.
With the Ark of the Covenant leading the way, Joshua crossed the River Jordan with his army.
I'm sure this is an elite fighting force.
The conquest of Jericho is one in which God is clearly in the role of a divine warrior.
The Bible tells us that Joshua conquered Jericho by walking around the city 7 times.
The whole time carrying the mystical Ark of the Covenant, which the Bible describes as having special powers.
God at that moment causes the walls to crumble and to fall down. And then it's at that moment that you just get this image of them just rushing in on the city and flooding in and taking it over for better or for worse, however you view that kind of image, whether that's one of excitement and action or that's one of, hey, this is war and war can be ugly.
In this war, the Bible makes clear that no prisoner should be taken alive. Every man, woman, and child should be slaughtered. And according to the Bible, this bloody battle was just the first stop on Joshua's campaign.
Now, according to the book of Joshua, the Israelite troops invaded en masse from Transjordan, and in a period probably of a few months, conquered the whole land of Canaan, expelled or slaughtered the Canaanites, divided up the whole land among the 12 tribes. Then Joshua gives a sermon at the end, and it's all over.
Jericho is a highlight now on most Holy Land tours. The pilgrims are drawn here by the violent version of how the Israelites came into the Promised Land. But it's unlikely that this is actually how it happened.
People forget that there are 2 versions of the so-called conquest of Canaan in the Hebrew Bible.
The book of Joshua suggests a blitzkrieg. It's a form of mass colonialism, massive slaughter. It's horrible. And then we have the story of Judges, a gradual infiltration into the sparsely populated hill country. Do we want the blitzkrieg model, or do we want the gradual settlement model?
The question is, what do we believe? What do we actually think happened?
The archaeology does lend some support to the less dramatic and gentler account.
Of all the years when Jericho is inhabited, the one period where we want it to be inhabited so Joshua can attack it, there's nobody living there. It's empty. There's no wall for Joshua to knock down.
To put it bluntly, the book of Joshua is almost all fictitious.
Yes, there's some battles, yes, there's some killing, but overall, they're coming in and they're living side by side with some of the Canaanites.
This sounds radical, but when I talk to most people, they're relieved. The genocide that is God's will, Yahweh's will, never happened.
For some, The story told in the book of Joshua presents a troubling picture of a violent God. But others draw a sense of mission from the very same story. A few days after we visited Jericho, our team was invited to the graduation ceremony for Jonathan Friedland and his elite unit of the Israeli Defense Force cadets.
Just like Joshua and his troops came to Israel and had their battles here and were able to live here, I'm just continuing it just like my brother did it and my father did it and my grandfather did it. And that goes back all the way to the Bible days.
They had marched 175 kilometers overnight, a journey that ended here in the disputed Golan Heights along the Syrian border. The cadets' families joined them for the final stretch.
Joshua used a sword to conquer from Jericho. Nobody picked up their bags and said, "Dear Joshua, God promised you, here it is."
Historians who are trying to piece together the truth think the meaning of the story is less clear-cut.
One of the problems that we've got is that it's very difficult frequently to tell an Israelite from a Canaanite.
Eric Klein thinks it's possible that modern DNA testing will show that present-day Palestinians and Jews who are locked in a modern struggle of biblical proportions might go back to the same ancient tribe.
If it turns out the Israelites and the Canaanites are one and the same, not only would you have to throw out a lot of the biblical story, but you also might find out that the Palestinians and the Israelis are actually related, that they're either cousins or brothers, and then what does that do to modern politics? So everything is wrapped up in one big gargantuan mess.